Recording is on.
Hey everyone, this is I think it's the first call within the Bitcoin design community for 2023. I think we are just rocking on with UX research to start the year. This is call recording. This is the Bitcoin UX research call number 10, and it is the 3rd of January 2023. So yeah, on this call, we're going to discuss the UX Research Toolkit. We have Art over here, we have Jan, we have Christoph, and we have Jakub. Yeah, so what do you guys want to talk about? I'll make some notes.
I think it's a continuation of the work we've been doing with your leadership, Mo. We're in a place where we're kind of coming to a close on the build and scope aspect of the toolkits, right? We've come up with drafts for several of the ideas, and we've come to a draft for the jobs to be done section of it. So right now it's, I think, polishing things up so that we can have a alpha or beta to then put in front of humans, see what their feedback is, have it torn to shreds in the style of UX research, and build something better so it informs how we finish this asset off with the ship to market aspect of our deliverables. So I think for that, maybe I shared the link to our project plan.
Let me share that in the chats here just a minute. My
Yeah.
screen is unusually, or you can go ahead and share it in the chat as well, Art. Perfectly fine.
I just think it's maybe good to share our screen if anybody's watching the recording of it.
Oh yeah, good one. Let me drag this in here.
So a few quick questions once you open the document, and then we'll hop into the actual meat and potatoes.
This is saying screen 1. Let's see. Yeah. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
I'm sharing my screen. 1 second. I'm doing something wrong. Here it is. Is my screen visible now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So polishing things up in the build and in the scope and build section. I've got here as one point, so that we can do some user testing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that comes to mind?
I think that's really where we're at now. We just need to finish this up so that we can put this in front of other people. In terms of timelines, do you wanna open up the project plan and I'll write for you, because it's hard to multitask, Mo.
Yeah, this one
Yeah,
here.
let's do.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, I think if you're sharing it, we can't see it.
Is this not visible to you?
No.
How strange. 1 second.
Do you want me to share mine?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let's try that. Window. I think it's this one. Okay, please, can you confirm that you could see
Perfect.
the project? Okay, sweet. So, folks, when you have a second, please review the backgrounds, especially Christoph. I'd love your feedback on this. We're growing the links out, so past recordings will live here. Christoph, I think you had maybe an aside with Mo about the Bitcoin calendar not including dates for the UX Research Toolkit meetings. Once those are live or connected, then we can link them out of here as well. So there's a repository for it. I'd love to add Christoph, yourself, and everybody else on this call as contributors to roles and responsibilities. I know that we're doing a journey mapping session next week. Is that so?
Yeah, that's
With
by Jakub actually. So it's really great that he's on this call.
precisely. So Jakob, I'd love to add you like here formally, informally as a contributor. Let's call you the journey map lead. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
Go ahead.
And then I'll add your LinkedIn is cool. Yeah. The LinkedIn. And Christoph, you'll be our overseer.
Yeah, real quick, I added link to all the calendar issues in GitHub. I don't know how useful that is, and GitHub repository with issues, but that's the design calendar basically pulls in these issues and creates the calendar that we
I see.
subscribe to from it. So this is kind of the source, and this is basically just a search for the term UX research call in across all of our call issues. So if a call is not correctly labeled or doesn't have that in the title, then it will not show up or in the
Mo, is
description.
that a thumbs up?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure because for some reason, and I think Jan had it as well, the actual, it wasn't showing up in my Google Calendar.
Haha, there you go, Google Calendar. So Google Calendar is it's not very good at refreshing.
There
So
we go.
let's say you create an issue, you accidentally have the wrong date in there you accidentally put it like a month in the past or so, and then you change it. Google may not, sometimes it may pick that up, sometimes it may not pick that up. That is a Google Calendar issue that we've just noticed. So
Gosh.
use
Okay.
Apple Calendar or something else. Or sometimes it can also be good if you notice that a date was wrong, and this is people's calendars are already refreshed with the incorrect date. Maybe just delete it and create a new issue, and that will also force then Google Calendar to kind of just delete the old one and put in the new one with the correct date. So yeah, it's stupid, but it's
A
technology.
That's
question,
good to know, though.
a question for
Mo?
you, Art, because you're going to be testing out this scope and build section, and I know according to the timeline we have that as the 5th of February. Loose timelines. So let's just say, so the goal would be kind of to have this build and scope section kind of roughly ironed out before then. And then you're going to basically launch this loose timelines tightly held. You're going to basically launch this, usability testing on the actual build and scope and build section. So, would you, in terms of your timelines, would you need that build and scope section kind of wrapped up a couple days before, 5 days before the 5th of February, so that you can start working with it, planning what you're going to do with it?
The goal is for it to be done by the 5th.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it would need to be completed all sort of like in alpha beta phase by the 15th. So we have 2 weeks.
Whew.
Yeah, 2 weeks or so. Which honestly, like we've
Yeah.
done the bulk of the work.
We've done the
Like
bulk of the work. Yeah.
it shouldn't have to be polished at this. Like let's use the iterative rapid prototyping model here. Let's not like use the waterfall idea, right?
Yeah.
What we have is really good. Let's just put it in front of humans, see what they say, see if they like it, see if they don't, and that will give us enough data with which to improve what we've currently built, but then also to know how to proceed with the next phase of the toolkit.
Yeah. That was
So
perfect.
again, if this timeline is too tight, that's fine. Like mind you, I'm currently in mini retirement, so I have quite a bit of time.
Ooh, we caught you at a
uh,
good time.
right.
Mini retirement. Oh, that sounds lovely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So I have a lot of time to play with this. I'm happy to like lead the next section of it.
Perfect.
But if the team feels like we need to push, let's say by a week, that's fine. I'm okay with that
Now I'm good with sprinting. I'm really wanting to get on
to
with
get
it.
this
No, I'm
out.
good. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything
Um,
else anyone wants to speak about before we get into Jan's
yeah.
presentation about jobs to be done? Anything else? No? And welcome to this. This is a group of UX researchers just jamming together, Jakob. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with us. I think you're going to definitely be on the next call. It's so much of fun. So yeah, Jan, if you would like to, this is the meat of the call now. So Jan is going to be doing a bit of a presentation. He's done some work and he's basically created the section within the UX Research Toolkit, which is the jobs to be done, which is something that I've not been too familiar with. So I'm here to learn from him I'm here to learn from Art. I'm here to learn from Jakub, whoever's worked with that framework. So Jan, if you're happy to start presenting, yeah, feel free to go ahead.
Sure. So let me organize things. So basically, I have like short presentation, and then I would like to discuss the document. But I think I will start with the presentation, but because that will kind of give idea of my thinking. So let me share the screen. Okay, sorry. Can you see it?
Ooh, super cool. Did you draw this?
Yeah.
On the iPad?
I actually have Microsoft Surface something, and it has the drawing capabilities. So
Love
it's
this
quite
thing.
nice. It's just shame that I cannot draw in nice way, and it's ugly. But maybe that's better because then people need to focus on the content. Anyway, so about jobs to be done. Like by the way, like will be presenting kind of my way of understanding jobs to be done. So feel free to disagree or have different ideas. So my understanding jobs to be done, I would start with a story. Like let's say there is a man, and he goes to the bank for a mortgage, and you could kind of think, oh, mortgage, that's the product that we are offering to this man. But what's the jobs to be done behind it? And the story might be that, this guy, he doesn't want mortgage, but he wants to live in a house, right? So that's kind of the desired outcome. But you can go even further and say it's not really about the house, it's more about that his family, they live in small apartment, they have kids screaming around, and he cannot focus on the work, and that's why he's kind of thinking what to do with it, and he's kind of thinking about getting a bigger place, buy a house or something. But the funny thing is that you can also solve this issue by, I don't know, buying some noise canceling headphones or something like that, because that kind of do the same trick, right? And on this kind of made up story, I want to kind of show the jobs to be done thinking that sometimes we as a engineer, designers, product managers, whatever, we are really focused on the solutions, but the jobs to be done is trying to force us to think about kind of the struggle that people have in their real life. What is the context? What is kind of the desired outcome? And also, it kind of represents that people are always kind of projecting or thinking about different possible solution for their given struggle, and they are kind of evaluating, okay, how can I make a progress? And that for me is jobs to be done. It's about the struggle of people. It's the context they are in, the desired outcome, and also kind of the trade-offs between the possible solutions. So that's kind of the very simple introduction to jobs to be done. There's also one kind of aspect that jobs to be done is not living on an island. It's always kind of one jobs to be done usually leads to another one and another one, right? So first, like there is a mortgage, and I need to deal with a mortgage, but eventually I want a house, and then I want to live peacefully with my kids, right? And it's always kind of, you are always on the journey. And why the jobs to be done is interesting for us, because I think it is kind of thinking framework that help us really understand what our customers are going through, what are their mental models and stuff like that, and then we can do way better job, designing right solutions for them. But also, I think for me, actually, and I will get in the end to it, for me also jobs to be done actually is a way how to actually make the research meaningful, because very often I felt, I did the user testing, here I talk to customer, here I check the analytics, check here I check the competitive, competition or whatever. But it was like sort of kind of pieces of information. But when I look and do those exercises through the lens of jobs to be done, suddenly it's way more organized, because when I'm checking the competition, I'm kind of looking for the aspect of people's life and how they are solving right now, and suddenly I can get much deeper insight. Anyway, I'm a little bit rambling, so let's move on. Okay. So I think it's easier to understand, at least for me, jobs to be done, if I kind of split the jobs into kind of two types. So one, we could call it like kind of big hires, and that means, when you switch to new product, when you purchase some new product, and the small hire is like when you are actually using it. So for example, I don't know, like let's use some Bitcoin example. You decided that you will use a new hardware wallet, or new whatever new way of purchasing Bitcoin. And the big, like, analyzing the big hires should give you idea what's happening in people's mind about why they actually decided to switch from one product to another. And kind of one insight is that usually it's like some kind of journey. It's not like that it's happening, from minute to minute. It's like usually they feel some struggle. They were not happy with the current solution, and they have kind of first thought about, hey, maybe there is something different, something better for me. Maybe first, whenever they see some interesting information, they were kind of, okay, this is interesting, I will read it. At some point, their frustration with maybe the current product is so huge that they start actively looking. They start googling it, and so on. And at some point, they are in kind of this struggling moment that they decide to switch, hopefully, to your product. And after that, they will be consuming it. And you know, I'm this is inspired by Bob Moesta, and he basically say, hey, it's kind of interesting to understand kind of the timeline in the people's head, and because there are events. Maybe the first thought was because you did transaction and it failed, and you were whatever angry about it. Then maybe you lose some money or whatever, right? Like something happened, and that makes you kind of think. And what he says is that whenever people are, again, kind of projecting different kind of solution ideas, they're thinking, hey, how they can make progress with their struggle, they have kind of different competing feelings. And he kind of represent it with this idea that there are kind of pushes, meaning, I'm kind of angry or not satisfied with the current solution, so I'm kind of looking for something new. Then maybe I learn about this new wallet, and it has all this great functionality that is really interesting for me. So it's kind of pulling me into this new solution. But on the other hand, there are kind of forces that are kind of fighting against you switching to the new product. And it's like you have a habit using this your current product, because yeah, you're used to it. It's all fine. Okay, there are some problems, but yeah, like there's no surprises. But also you have anxieties about the new solution, because maybe it will be even worse, or whatever. So understanding kind of all this give you idea about how you can kind of leverage it, and how you can maybe even communicate at this point. Like for example, for the pushes, it's like, hey, how you can communicate what problems your product is solving, and kind of offering a new solution. But also you should kind of think about, hey, like if people are afraid about switching, like maybe you should do better job communicating. I think this kind of big hire analysis is very useful. Uh, if you are aware of this pirate metrics, like, right, the awareness, activation, acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referrals. I would say the big hire analysis give you a good idea about the awareness, acquisition, activation, because you kind of see, where people are looking for things, what they are thinking, and so on. And I would also say always about the purchase, meaning revenues. And here's kind of first exercise that you can kind of practically do, and that's customer interviews using kind of jobs to be done method. And you can think about it as kind of gathering stories, real stories, how people actually purchase your product. So the easiest way how to do it is, I don't know, send emails to your current customers, say, hey, do you have, whatever, 30 minutes, 45 minutes to talk? And basically then during the interview, you are trying to understand. So, hey, do you remember when was the day when you purchased a product? And they will start telling you a story, and you trying to understand all the details. And usually there are events, and you try to identify all the events, and then you discuss the events and kind of the feeling and emotions around it and what happened and the context. And that give you all those four forces. And then you have kind of nice analysis how people purchase your product, which then kind of inform you how you can, make it better for the potential new customers. So that's big hires. Small hires, that's basically when somebody purchases your product and start using it. And here you are trying to understand kind of on the feature level why people, for example, open your app and do something there, maybe with specific features. And again, you are doing it usually through customer interviews. And you try to kind of, again, sort of get the stories from people. So for example, you ask, hey, the last time you use our app, what did you do and why did you do it, and when you did it, right? And they can start telling you stories like, I don't know, I was on Twitter reading about Bitcoin, there was some bullish chart, so I went to Swan because I'll promote my company, and I buy some Bitcoin, right? And that's actually a real story, that this was the trigger, and it led to using the feature purchase Bitcoin, and right, and now I understand, okay, the triggers, and I a little bit understand the motivations, because the person felt bullish because they read something bullish about Bitcoin, and that's why they try to buy more Bitcoin. And actually, what's interesting is that because you are using the product repeatedly, so if you have motivation, if you understand the motivation, and if you are kind of successful in that, your product is successful in meeting those demands, it leads to delights, which then people are happy. And what that means, it means that people create habits using your product, which is something that you want, because because it helps with the retention, engagement, and you can really understand why people are using it. But your product is usually not perfect, right? And people have, again, anxieties about using your product, because they are frustrated about some aspect, there are bugs, there are something it's not exactly how they would imagine, and that kind of makes them think, maybe I should try a different solution, right? Again, here kind of understanding sort of like what happens when there is some trigger, and what kind of is happening in people's head, basically before the action, and then when they use it, and what are the frustration. It again helps you understand how you can improve your product, because you don't want people to start thinking that they should switch maybe to something else. So basically the analysis, like what triggers the behavior, what's happening in the people's head before they use your product, and then when they use your product, like kind of what's in their head after they use it, if they are happy or not, and so on. And it really helps you to improve your product, your features, and so on. There's kind of one note. If you have kind of this, again, sort of diagram or notes about the triggers, motivation, anxieties, and so on, you also understand that some jobs are kind of more functional, that I need to do something because of my job, I don't know, I need to use spreadsheet and so on. Some are more emotional, some are social because I don't know, I want to brag about that I did something and I want to share it on Facebook, right? It's kind of social aspect. And again, kind of this kind of distinct, this kind of categorization of jobs helps you understand, hey, like this is more about, the function. This is more about how it's kind of perceived by people and so on. So that's kind of analysis of the small hires, meaning when people are using particular features. And here are kind of two more tools that I found useful that relates to that. And first is jobs to be done stories. It's kind of the agile user stories, but kind of formulated more aligned with jobs to be done framework. So basically, you formulate it as like when something happened, some context, then somebody wants something. That's the motivation. So they can, and you kind of say the desired outcome. And the jobs to be done stories, I think it's kind of better way how to formulate your backlog, because it better reflects the reality, and it's kind of more user centric, opposed to, for example, user stories where it's more like, it's kind of describing the solution. As a user, I want to build a new calendar, and it's like it says very little about why we are actually doing it. So that's one thing. Second thing, we discuss competitive analysis. Some people from the jobs to be done kind of field are more using the alternative analysis, because here's the reasoning. They kind of split your competitors in three different types. The first one is direct competitor. So imagine Netflix, right? Like Ezekiel say that when people are bored after the dinner and they want to relax, they open Netflix or HBO. It tries to solve the same job in the same way. Then you have secondary competitors where it's like same job but completely different solution. So I can open Netflix and watch some TV show, or I can open, I don't know, TikTok and kind of be browsing and seeing all the funny videos. Again, it's about my amusement when I'm bored after the dinner, but it's completely different solution. But also you have kind of indirect competitors, and it's kind of different job, but they are in conflict. And the good idea is, because the thing is that very often people are irrational, or like they have lots of things going on in their life, they have different struggles, and sometimes it's competing, right? So at the same time, I can be after the dinner bored and I want to watch something, but also I have this goal to be mindful and whatever, maybe limit my exposure to digital media, right? And I'm still the same person, and maybe I'm using some whatever meditation application or some application that limits my time on the internet, and that's in the conflict with Netflix, right? And why you are kind of doing this analysis, because whenever you identify some job and you see how people are kind of what they are hiring for this job, sometimes you can even say, hey, okay, we have this competitive, like sort of completely different job that is goes directly against what we are building. And kind of knowing that again helps you, maybe that you will somehow make the product or feature somehow different. So I don't know, maybe in Netflix you will create some feature that limit the time, and then uh, that you spend watching TV shows, and then people will not have the need to install some meditation app because you kind of sort of solve it for them, right? So basically it gives you again better idea what's happening in people's mind. So that's small hires. And kind of last slide is about why actually jobs to be done. I think the first one I mentioned, like before I really apply jobs to be done, sometimes I felt I'm kind of doing activities that are not really connected together. And when I start looking to the jobs to be done, and I was really analyzing, here I'm analyzing these jobs to be done using analytics, this competitive analysis, and so on. Suddenly, it was kind of more aligned together, and it made much more sense. I think also it really helps communicate the product strategy, because suddenly you have kind of this bottom up approach where you have all the jobs that you identify that your customer wants, and you can say, hey, like, we will focus on those jobs, and it's way easier to communicate it to rest of the company, rest of the teams, and so on. I think it's actually a great way for researchers to establish relationships with other departments, because let's be honest, maybe sales, marketing, customer support, maybe they heard about research, but probably they don't have huge understanding what it is. But imagine if you as a researcher can give you all the information to sales about where what is the kind of triggers, where people like about the journey, how they purchase the product. Suddenly it's very useful information for the sales. It's very useful information for the marketing, even for the customer support, right? Like, usually people are communicating through solution, and it's really hard to understand the problem. But when the customer support kind of is aware about all the jobs that our products is solving, and suddenly maybe they have easier way to understand what's really is going on with this person that is complaining, because you kind of know the whole story, and you can do better job in resolving it. And generally, I think when you establish the jobs to be done, and it's kind of the whole company knows about it, what jobs are we focusing as a company, what are we trying to solve, it gives the whole company a language, same language, so across the departments. And the good thing is that first you understand each other, but second, it's really oriented and like customer centric, because let's be honest, again, Bitcoin is very technical thing, and it's very natural even in non-Bitcoin companies that you are focusing on the solution, but actually you, from the product perspective and design perspective, you want to do the opposite, right? Like, you want to start with the customer, and jobs to be done framework really kind of forces you doing that. So yeah, that's kind of my understanding of jobs to be done. And I guess now we can jump to the document. Does it make sense?
Wow, well done. Thank you. Thank you so much for putting this together. I will do this. Really, really nice. Jakob, you'd like to speak? Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to clap, but I actually have a question. So you said it's a great tool, and it seems to be a great tool to use as a language between departments. I wonder how you introduce that, or like, let's say, what's the like delivery of that jobs to be done? Is it just like a document, or you share it with some personas, or you don't use personas at all? Like, how do you introduce that language, and how you introduce that to use with other teams? I guess there are many ways, but I'm just wondering how you do it.
That's a good question. And I don't have great answer, because I don't have that much experience to kind of say, hey, this is the best way. But for me, it was the most kind of natural way how to start is start doing the customer interviews and using kind of the jobs to be done techniques, and start communicating the results, because you are gathering stories, and actually stories are good way how to communicate things to other people. So yeah, I start with jobs to be done, and uh, and it's basically this document about that. When I do jobs to be done, I'm trying to kind of capture the notes, and then kind of share it with others, and obviously kind of when the organization use Slack, mention people that might be interested, right? So if we find out something interesting about where people kind of learn about our product, maybe I should mention somebody from marketing or sales, so they are aware of this, and because they can read the story in kind of very packaged way. it might be interesting, and that way you can kind of start communicating. The second way is obviously when you, it doesn't matter whatever you use. Let's say that you use something like user stories and you have kind of backlog of things what you want to do. Basically, in those user stories, start using this kind of language that it's not about describing the solution, but you always start with a problem and start with a job that supposedly should be kind of solved with this feature that we are about to build. So that's kind of my way.
I had a question as well with the how part. So the interviews, I've never done a jobs to be done interview before, and I'm thinking of like I'm kind of putting myself in the shoes of someone who's never done it before as well. In the interview, try to help interviewees articulate the story of how they purchased your product. So you're basically jumping on a Google Meet call or whichever, or Jitsi or whatever, and then you're asking them if it's okay to record the call. And then you basically, is the question just basically, hey, can you just describe to me the story of what made you decide to start using this Bitcoin wallet, for example?
Exactly, something like that. Actually, the Bob Moesta, the author that I stole kind of the idea from, he actually suggests that you start an interview with something like, "Hey, imagine that we are shooting documentary movie about how you purchase this product, and I am the director, and I will be asking you question, but we want to get the story, interesting story." And basically, also he said, actually the most important question is when. So you say, hey, like, so yeah, tell me how you purchased the product. And first question would be something like, do you actually remember when it happened? When what was the day? And even you can be a little bit silly and say, like, do you remember the weather? So really, and basically the idea is to really force people to not tell you the opinions, but really what happened. So if you are kind of forcing them to say the facts and really the story without saying, hey, I bought this, because when people are saying opinions, usually they are not professionals in our fields, so they are more trying to kind of express something, but you are trying to kind of unpack what it really means. So that's why we're first trying to kind of reconstruct sort of the story. So we say, hey, I purchased this, and say, and when it happened, and say, oh, it was 2 weeks ago. And then I would ask something like, and do you remember why on that day? And they say, oh yeah, because I don't know, I get raised in my job and I have some extra money, and I was like, I want to invest in Bitcoin, but like whatever, and something start happening, and then it's kind of natural conversation that you try to go deeper and deeper, what happened before, and so on, and so yeah, the goal is kind of say first when, and then what was the context, and that will give you kind of understanding what happened. Yeah.
So you're not really asking like a series of systemized questions.
No.
It's more starting very, very, very broad, and then you're kind of just asking more questions depending on what they're saying.
Exactly. Actually, it has two parts for me, and by the way, I'm not sure if it's the best idea to do it this way. But first, I focus on the big hire, so how they started with our product. And second, when I'm kind of done with that and I reconstruct the timeline and I have all the kind of reasoning, what happened and why it happened and so on, then I asking things like, usually my first question in the second part is like, when is the last time you use our app? And then again, kind of the same process. They say, hey, like, so, and exactly, they could say something like, yeah, I was on Twitter and I realized, yeah, like for a long time, didn't check the Bitcoin price. I go to the app and blah blah blah, right? So, but yeah, I'm trying to really gather stories, and I really try to facilitate the interview in a way that people are not saying their opinions, because I don't care about their opinions. I really care about what really happened and what was their context. And very often, actually, they will start saying some silly things like, "Oh, I'm really unique because I don't know, I was in a bus going to work, and I was reading Twitter, and and suddenly you have the context, right? Like people on their way to their job or to the office, they are bored, they are checking the news, and as part of it they have habit to check the price, and that's where when they open the application, right? And suddenly you have the context, and very often they are not unique at all, and there are many people doing kind of the same thing in kind of similar context and so on. So yeah, that's kind of what the interview is about.
That's an interesting one with that specific example. I wonder if, well, first of all, thanks for that presentation. I wonder with some of these things where if you know, okay, he was in a bus checking the price on Twitter or something, when people start doing something, sometimes it's the 10th time they're thinking about this, and somehow they pull the trigger. And they've encountered this thing, maybe they came across the price 10 times before over the last 6 months or 2 years or so. And slowly this desire has built up inside of them that speaks to something else. Maybe it is just FOMO, maybe they feel poor, their desire to live a better life or build a bigger house, or I don't know, something like that. Maybe they feel stuck in their lives, feel like their job's not going anywhere, and this is like their potential lottery ticket into a better future. I don't know.
Right.
It's interesting from the interview. It's a lot of working backwards, right, to some fundamental need, desire, want, problem. Yeah, it's a tricky one, and I think something like, I don't know, Bitcoin and speculative investments. It's difficult to figure out what it actually is. There, like the jobs to be done. The classic example of the milkshakes. Very simple. People go to work in the morning. They're hungry. They just want to be full. Right. Very practical. Yeah, it's interesting. My brother told me another story. Told me a story this morning about Sweden going cashless. I guess that was not necessarily just the country going, being like, hey, we love technology, we're so advanced. But apparently they had a lot of bank robberies and bus robberies and all of that. So there was a very practical need. And that was the job to be done, reduce heists and robberies. And so they told the bus drivers, like the company said, we're not accepting cash anymore. Apparently, I looked it up here real quick. There was some standardized fare included for 220 kroner in 2006, and that resulted to more buses carrying more cash, and then the bus robberies increased by a ton, and then there were a bunch of other robberies. So they were like, cash sucks.
Right.
And they wanted to fix that. And then going digital was not necessarily just the desire to be futuristic or be tech savvy. It was just a very practical need.
And also, just thinking about this as well is, I know that empathy is a word that's kind of a bit overused in the UX field, but and then feel free to continue, Jan. Is that let's say a designer designs, or a company designs a specific part of an application, and they're like, why aren't the users using this? We've taken so much of time to design it, and we've run it, and so much of time, and then you can go back to the story and be like, well, actually, this is actually what this person wants to do. So they actually want to just skip over everything that you've created and go right down to doing this. And you can just bring that story back. So I really see how this connects. It's really nice. Thank you, Jan. Feel free to continue.
Yeah, but maybe small reaction on what Chris said. Like, the question, like, why people started with Bitcoin and why they do first purchase is really a big one. And probably in Western world it's kind of made something like speculation, investment, stuff like that. In other parts of the world, maybe it's a bit different. There are exactly stories like, yeah, I don't have a bank. Maybe it's a way how to whatever hold something and do regular transaction and stuff like that. So probably the jobs to be done analysis in kind of in other countries than the Western would be probably very interesting, and will be probably very different. But what I would say is sometimes it's easier to start with really small jobs, because again, what I said on the beginning is that it's not one job. It's basically a series of different jobs. Sometimes they are competing and so on. maybe start with something simple. And like maybe my job is that I want to buy Bitcoin, and we don't need to really understand why I want it, but like right now you are using something, maybe I don't know, Coinbase, and you are not happy with it because I don't know, maybe you hear all the rumors, so you say, oh, maybe I should self custody, and suddenly the kind of smaller jobs to be done is, okay, I need to figure out my custody, and I want to maybe figure out something that and it's kind of back to this emotional job. Like I want to use something that I trust, and maybe to this product I don't trust. So right, because all what you we all kind of know what's happening, or last couple of months what happened, right? So people are actually, they have lots of emotions, and they are evaluating things, and understanding why they are evaluating, what are the trade-offs between the solution that they are using and why they are thinking to switch something different. It is very interesting one. So but what I want to say, sometimes start with the kind of smallest job, and start from there, and then slowly maybe you will even understand why people purchase the Bitcoin in the first place. But it's definitely easier to start with the smaller jobs.
Yeah, I think in that sense, it's very they're great companions to personas. They're like it's like a different perspective, and I'm wondering, like with some of these things, it's called jobs, right? It's a very functional thing. Other terms we use are user needs, which a need sounds like, I don't know, it can be more of an emotional type of thing. So I sometimes wonder, jobs to be done, and Clay Christensen, he was always wearing his suit. I wonder if that was specific terminology that was kind of targeted towards corporate environments and whatnot, where sometimes I feel like with personas or jobs to be done, and they're very other tools where in a way they're very similar, but they're formulated slightly differently for different audiences. So yeah, I feel like there's a whole bunch of overlap between these different types. They all have their nuances and their unique characteristics and dynamics, but there's still a bunch of overlap.
I agree. I feel like I'm not kind of historian in research field, but it feels to me that there are lots of methods that originated from different fields, right? Like exactly, maybe some product designer. I mean, kind of for physical product, started from somewhere. Then we have marketers who use before internet personas for targeting the ads and stuff like that. And then software industry happens, and we have our own methods, and obviously there, I think the principles are the same, right? Like we are trying to understand what the customer wants, and then kind of offer to them. And because all the other industry has kind of different background, so they kind of figure out their own technique. And as kind of today everything is kind of merging to the one thing, because even if you are doing physical work, you need to have a website and so on. It's kind of all kind of merging to one approach. But obviously, because the history is a little bit different with different background, there's lots of overlaps, or people are using different terminology, or right, and so on. So that's why I think there are lots of confusion, and I'm confused very often myself. But I think the point is that we want to understand the people that wants our product, to offer them good solution. And so it's good to kind of understand all the different methods, and be inspired by that. But in the end, I think they are trying to do the same.
Totally. Do you think there's one or some techniques more appropriate for open source or for Bitcoin than others? Or do you think it's more about who you speak to?
I don't know. I think it's really. I don't think, because open source is really, for me, it's like about discussing sort of the solution or how the solution is made. Where really this is about what problems are we solving for kind of the real people. So I don't think, my intuition tells me that it doesn't matter if it's closed source or open source. It's really more about what problem are we tackling.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes sense.
I would love to see the rest of this, but I see that we've got like 7 minutes left. I don't know what you guys would like to do. Would you like to kind of wrap up the next steps, or Jan, would you like to like finish off this last bit of the presentation?
Yeah, like, basically based on that presentation, I put together this document, and kind of outline sort of 3 exercises. Of the For me, the most important one is the jobs to be done interviews, and I'm using this table myself. So it's basically when I record the interview, then I'm kind of listening again and kind of feeling, oh, probably when this happened, it was probably passive looking, and this represents the pools and so on. And I have kind of table that represents this, and kind of the same thing, for the features when people use the feature. So that's one aspect. Then kind of way how to create backlog of stories, or how to communicate the stories, kind of use the language. That's another aspect. And third aspect is more kind of direction or tips when you do competitive analysis, kind of think from this perspective. Okay, I have a job. What's direct competitors for secondary, and what's the indirect competitors? So, and that's pretty much it. So,
I'm looking for the clapping tool over here. Here it is. There you go. Totally forgot where it was. It's been a while since I've been on Jitsi.
This is great. Jan, thank you so much for
Incredible.
this is a lot more thorough than how my team even used jobs. Like, we use it more as a mental model, right, or as a philosophy. And this is the actual practice. I do love it, and I appreciate
It's
it.
incredible.
In terms of like iterating on this, Mo, Jakob, Christoph, please have a read through this document here, this brief, and if anything's confusing or not understood, like, let us know, because this will help us like come closer to a finalized toolkit.
Yeah.
Like, Christoph, some of the questions you asked were very important. If they come up as you're going through this, please let us know.
Yeah, I think for me a big thing is after an overview like this, to get really practical. Try to exactly maybe take some of the personas that Patricia has created or some examples, and just actually write out what those jobs would be, and then compare it to the personas and anything else to just see. Yeah, just get really hands-on. That always helps me really solidify my understanding, and also figure out where I still have gaps in things. So I think that'd be a cool thing for myself, at least, an exercise to do next.
I wonder if down the road, I know our priority here is an asset that we're wanting to put out, but if down the road it might make sense to, Jan, like, run a set of interviews using this model and output an asset that let's say the sort of the meta jobs that are consistent across all Bitcoin purchases, let's say, regardless of if it's Swan or whatever, right?
This is a really good point, because I was actually thinking that to do interviews exactly how people started with Bitcoin, because it's a big question. But if we are able to capture the insight for the newcomers, I think all the products in the Bitcoin ecosystem would benefit from that, because probably there are common anxieties, common sort of, I think especially the anxieties, because you don't understand maybe some habits and stuff like that. I think it would help enormously to all the products. So I think that this is a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, from practical experience with the guide and the Bitcoin UI kit and whatnot, a lot of people want to skip the manual and just see the actual thing, and work backwards from that. And they'll just go into the Figma file and copy paste screens, and then if something comes up, they'll read the theory behind it or so. But seeing a practical example, a good one, or even one that they could, with slide adaptations, maybe already use for their product, that's likely to attract or be a good entry point for a lot of people. And then they can always go further along their journey. Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. This has been Jan. This has been like a, I don't know, like a university level. It's so good. I'd love to, you made so many nice diagrams as well. I'd love to, in maybe as part of the write up, maybe redesign some of those diagrams that you did. I mean, I'm happy to do it, in Figma. And next week we have Jakob basically going to be doing the user journey mapping, which is amazing. And that's going to be a practical example of how he did user journey mapping for Get Albi. So that's going to be really, really nice to see, because we have that as part of the UX Research Toolkit as well. So yeah, I'm going to hop into this. No, I did it wrong again. I'm going.
Should I prepare a similar document, or you want to tackle for journey mapping?
Sorry, what did you say, Jakob?
I think there is like a draft of journey mapping document, so I can prepare one too, and you can later help me shape it for the best. Similar as Jan prepared jobs to be done.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. That sounds like a good one.
So Jakob, you're saying you want to contribute to the write-up of the journey mapping toolkit assets?
Yeah, I mean, unless you want that job to be done.
Man, sounds like you want it.
If you want it, you got it. Just feel free.
Although I mean, keep in mind I did journey mapping like 3 times in my life, so I'm
Okay.
sure you guys also did it. But
We'll work together, dude. We'll improve it together.
It's totally collaborative with everything that we do.
A real small thing, real quick.
Yeah.
Leon from Advancing Bitcoin, I sent him some ideas for conference ideas, and one of them was to do a very practical workshop around user research, and he said that also sounds really interesting. His goal with Advancing Bitcoin is to give developers, builders, everything they need to make really good Bitcoin products, and some hands-on workshop around user research, probably also something that
And is this in person, Christoph, or is this an online conference?
I think it's in person in London, but I don't know
God
if
damn it.
they do offer remote or not.
Yeah, I know. By the way, yeah, go ahead.
Folks, I gotta run.
Yeah.
Mo, Jan, epic work as always, Christoph. Keep me in the loop with that conference, because I might fly to London. Fuck it.
Yeah, why not? If you're in retirement. I'm gonna basically wrap up the call with just cheers, Art. Guys, just a quick wrap up. I think this was absolutely amazing. Seriously, thank you for your time. Also for Jakob, also for attending the call, and also for your time next week, because you're like gonna basically spend an hour just like, doing a presentation. But also Jan, I know you put a lot of work into creating the presentation. Seriously, appreciate it. Also this entire write-up, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I was trying to think of like next steps. We've already made some notes over here. Art was basically editing. Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yep.
I'll try and wrap this up as quickly as possible.
I also need to go, so see you.
Bye, Jakob.
Did you want to stop the recording?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Let me stop the recording.
So a brief thought for